In 1973, a train built by aerospace engineers crossed from Montreal to Toronto in 3 hours and 59 minutes. It tilted through curves, sliced the air with a drag coefficient lower than most sports cars, and outran anything on North American rails. Today, that same journey takes 5.5 hours. Not a single turbo train car was preserved. Canada built the future of rail, celebrated it, then quietly destroyed every last trace. And it wasn't the first time. This is the story of a nation that kept engineering the future, then choosing not to live in it. In the mid-1960s, Canadian National Railway faced a reckoning. Passenger rail, once the backbone of national travel, was collapsing under the weight of new highways and the jet age. Between 1955 and 1965, intercity rail ridership in North America fell by 45%. In Canada, the numbers were just as grim. CN's passenger service, burdened with empty seats and aging rolling stock, saw its deficit swell to $45 million in 1964 alone. Board minutes from the era show mounting anxiety. Passenger losses were swallowing more than a fifth of the operating budget by 1966. Meanwhile, government policy offered little comfort. A 1965 Department of Transport review made clear that blanket subsidies were unsustainable, urging instead a balanced transportation system and hinting that only a dramatic, high-profile intervention might justify continued public support. Pressure mounted from all sides. Politicians demanded a solution that could stem the bleeding without endless public spending. The public, swept up by the promise of cheap flights and new highways, abandoned the rails in droves. A 1965 Gallup poll found that over 60% of Canadians saw the future of travel in cars and planes, not trains. Inside CN's boardroom, the mood turned desperate. The phrase "miracle solution" appears again and again in internal memos. By December 1966, directors voted to accelerate any project that could restore relevance or provide a dignified exit from passenger service altogether. An emergency capital injection of $30 million was approved, but the board knew the window for action was closing fast. The stakes could not have been higher. Without a radical fix, CN faced the prospect of permanent insolvency on its passenger routes, political humiliation, and the slow erasure of a service that had once defined Canadian nationhood. In that crisis of climate, the search for salvation began, not in the traditions of railroading, but in the unlikeliest corners of Canadian industry. On December 14, 1966, Canadian National Railway signed a contract that stunned both the rail and aerospace worlds. Instead of turning to traditional locomotive builders, CN placed its faith, and $7 million per train set, into the hands of United Aircraft of Canada. This was not a minor procurement. It was a gamble at the scale of a moonshot, with a contract value that rivaled the largest public technology investments of the era. United Aircraft, best known for jet engines like the J-79 powering the CF-104 Starfighter, suddenly found itself tasked with building the future of Canadian rail. The partnership was as improbable as it was ambitious. United Aircraft's chief engineer, a veteran of turbine propulsion, brought a team steeped in aerospace discipline to a field where rivets, not rivets per minute, had long been the measure of progress. The contract called for a fleet of gas turbine, articulated trains capable of running at 125 miles per hour between Montreal and Toronto, speeds that, on paper, would leapfrog anything in North America. The agreement specified not just delivery, but a full transfer of aerospace engineering practices into railway design, from wind tunnel testing to turbine-grade tolerances. Transport Minister Paul Hellyer championed the deal as a bold step toward a new national identity, one that would prove Canada could out-innovate its rivals. In Parliament, Hellyer declared the Turbo Train project a symbol of Canadian ingenuity, promising that the country would not only catch up to the world's best, but set the pace. The political stakes were enormous. The Turbo was to be both a commercial rescue and a statement of national ambition, its contract terms reflecting a belief that technology itself could restore the fortunes of a failing industry. Yet beneath the optimism, the contract's scale revealed just how desperate the moment had become. For CN, this was the last card to play. For United Aircraft, it was a chance to prove that aerospace thinking could revolutionize rail. The ink was barely dry before teams of engineers began translating jet-age dreams into blueprints for a train that would carry the hopes and anxieties of a country searching for a miracle. The Turbo Train was not just another train. It was a machine that seemed to have arrived from another era, one where Canada dared to outpace the world. At its core stood the GT250 gas turbine, a power plant more at home in a jet than on rails. Each unit delivered 2,500 horsepower, driving the train forward with a whine that sounded nothing like the rumble of diesel. The numbers were staggering for the time: a top speed of 200 kilometers per hour on paper, and a drag coefficient of 0.2, thanks to a body shaped in NASA wind tunnels. Even today, that aerodynamic profile stands out: sleek, knife-edged, with every surface honed for speed. But the real magic was in the tilt. The Turbo Train could lean into curves by up to 5 degrees, using a hydraulic system borrowed straight from aerospace engineering. This let it glide through the tight bends of the Montreal to Toronto corridor at speeds no conventional train could match, while passengers barely felt the sway. Engineers spoke of it with awe. One lead designer, quoted in a 1967 technical briefing, called it the closest thing to flying you'll ever do on the ground. Every component was an act of defiance against the old order. The articulated cars, the lightweight alloys, the seamless joints, all chosen to shave away resistance and squeeze every last kilometer per hour from the rails. Even the train's undercarriage was a study in minimalism, designed to reduce turbulence and save precious fuel. The result was a machine that seemed to promise not just a new train, but a new identity for Canadian rail. On paper, the Turbo Train was a miracle. In the boardrooms and briefing books, it was the future, measured in horsepower, tilt angles, and drag coefficients. The only question left was whether this miracle could survive its first encounter with reality. On June 18, 1968, the Turbo Train thundered onto the New York to Boston corridor, a streak of steel and glass slicing through the heart of the Northeast. This was no ordinary test run. For 12 months, Penn Central ran the Canadian-built prototype in regular service, pitting aerospace ambition against the battered reality of American rail. The Turbo's turbine whine echoed off Connecticut cuttings, its self-tilting carriages leaning into curves with a grace that left passengers gripping their armrests, half in awe, half in disbelief. The American press seized on the spectacle. The New York Times ran a headline that seemed almost giddy: "Turbo-powered train whizzes across Connecticut." On August 8, 1968, speed monitors clocked the train at 122 miles per hour near New Haven, a record for North American passenger service outside of dedicated test runs. Railway Age called it the first true interdisciplinary effort to revive intercity rail, while the Boston Globe splashed photos of the train's futuristic nose on its front page. Penn Central's president, Robert R. Young, told reporters, "If we can prove reliability, the turbo may be the salvation of our passenger service." For a fleeting moment, the turbo train was the toast of American rail. Its 3-hour, 45-minute runs between Boston and New York slashed nearly an hour off the best diesel schedules. The interior, with its panoramic windows and aircraft-style seats, felt like a leap into the future. Passengers described the sensation as flying on rails. Even skeptics took notice. Trade journals debated whether this Canadian marvel could spark a renaissance for Amtrak, which was still years away from formation. But beneath the headlines, the trial was more than a technical demonstration. It was a proof of concept, an audacious claim that North America could match, or even surpass, the high-speed dreams taking shape in France and Japan. For 12 months, the turbo train delivered on that promise, earning the kind of acclaim and attention that Canadian rail had not seen in decades. The irony, sharpened by every mile, was that this revolution was built in Canada, showcased in the United States, and yet would soon face a fate that no one in those exuberant summer months could have imagined. The turbo's arrival in Canada was a spectacle that defied the gloom of the times. In April 1973, the first train glided out of Montreal's Central Station, its turbine whine echoing the promise of a new era. Crowds lined the platforms, waving flags and craning for a glimpse of the silver and orange bullet, while news cameras rolled and radio hosts described the scene with a sense of disbelief. CN's president stood before a bank of microphones, declaring the turbo a symbol of Canadian innovation and promising that the country would no longer play second fiddle to Europe or Japan. For a moment, that claim seemed unassailable. Timetables boasted a 3-hour and 59-minute run between Montreal and Toronto, nearly an hour and a half faster than the old Rapido. The train regularly reached 78% of its capacity, a figure that railway officials had not seen in decades. Posters plastered across commuter corridors showed the turbo streaking past the St. Lawrence, all speed and confidence, while CBC documentaries celebrated the train as proof that Canada could build the future on its own terms. Inside, passengers found themselves in a different world. Panoramic windows framed the countryside in cinematic sweeps. The ride was smooth, the tilt barely perceptible, and the sense of acceleration unmistakable. Business travelers, students, and families alike told reporters that the turbo felt more like an airplane than a train. One minister of transport, after stepping off a morning run, told the press, "This is what progress looks like. Canadian-made, Canadian-driven." The turbo became a fixture in national conversation. School children drew its streamlined nose in art class. Editorials called it a point of pride, a declaration that Canada could not only match the world's best, but lead. For a brief, dazzling stretch, the turbo was more than a train. It was the country's answer to the future, a promise made tangible in steel and glass. Yet even as the fanfare reached its peak, the foundations beneath the turbo's triumph were already beginning to tremble. In October 1973, the world changed overnight. Oil prices, once stable, shot up by 70% in a matter of weeks. For the turbo train, this was not just a headline, it was a death sentence written in fuel receipts. The cost of turbine-grade fuel in Canada jumped from 27 cents to 43 cents per liter within a single year. The turbo, burning through 4.4 liters per kilometer, suddenly became the most expensive train to operate on the continent. What had been a symbol of Canadian daring now looked, on the balance sheet, like a reckless gamble. Inside the maintenance yards, the mood shifted from pride to anxiety. The chief engineer at CN's Pointe Saint-Charles shops began logging overhaul intervals that defied the original projections. Turbine hot sections designed for the pristine world of aerospace broke down under the constant vibration and grit of railway service. By 1975, availability had dropped to 78%, far below the 95% promised in the glossy brochures. Mechanics, trained on diesels, struggled with the intricacies of oil circuit contamination and blade fatigue. Each time a train was sidelined for repairs, the cost mounted, and the faith in the project eroded a little more. The arithmetic was merciless. Every kilometer run by the turbo drained the budget faster than any rival. Diesel locomotives, once dismissed as relics, now looked prudent. United Aircraft's maintenance teams issued warnings. Without immediate investment in specialized tooling and a major retrofit to improve fuel efficiency, the turbo would become unsustainable. But the political appetite for further spending had evaporated along with the cheap oil. What began as a national showcase for innovation now teetered on the edge, undone not by any single flaw, but by the collision of global economics and institutional paralysis. The dream of a Canadian high-speed future was bleeding out, one maintenance report at a time. VIA Rail's creation in 1977 brought the turbo train under new management, but not new vision. The federal handoff stripped away the last shreds of institutional memory from CN's engineering teams. VIA's first CEO, Pierre Mercier, inherited a shrinking budget and a mandate to cut costs, not to nurture innovation. Within a year, Ottawa ordered a 12% reduction in VA's capital spending. Maintenance staff, already overstretched, watched as specialized turbine tools disappeared from the shops and overdue overhauls were quietly postponed. The turbo, once a flagship, became an orphan, kept running on paper, but starved of attention and resources. Meanwhile, official optimism shifted to the LRC, light, rapid, comfortable, a new train built by Alcan and Bombardier that promised 160 kilometers per hour on conventional track. The LRC's first sets arrived with fanfare, but vibration problems and teething failures haunted early service. VIA's leadership, eager to escape the shadow of the turbo, pushed the LRC forward despite repeated delays. By 1981, the LRC's full deployment was still on hold, while the turbo limped along with no prospect of a major retrofit. The promise of high-speed rail had become an exercise in bureaucratic neglect, a vision lost not to technical impossibility, but to indifference and the slow grind of the budget axe. The final blow came quietly, not with headlines or public outcry, but with a line in the federal budget. In 1982, Ottawa withdrew the last $8 million earmarked for turbo operations. The Transport Minister's statement to Parliament was blunt. We cannot justify continued funding for a service with no economic rationale. There was no rescue, no retrofit, just a cold calculation that the turbo's time was over. On October 31st, 1982, the turbo train made its last scheduled run between Montreal and Toronto. Crew members later recalled the silence in the cab, the sense that they were not just ending a shift, but closing the door on an era. At the final stop, there were no speeches, no ceremony, just the hiss of brakes and the slow shuffle of passengers onto the platform. The train was quietly shunted to storage, its future already decided by a budget line and a shrug from the political class. For those who had kept the turbo running against the odds, the withdrawal felt less like a decision and more like an erasure, a quiet burial of a dream that once carried the hopes of a nation. France's TGV entered commercial service in 1981, sprinting across the Paris to Lyon line at 260 kilometers per hour. Within a decade, the TGV became the gold standard for high-speed rail, its blue and silver trains celebrated in museums and national memory. In Canada, the turbo train vanished without a trace. No car preserved, no plaque, not even a section of track reserved for remembrance. The Montreal to Toronto corridor, once promised a 3-hour, 15-minute journey, now sits at 5.5 hours, slower than the turbo's best runs half a century ago. The contrast is stark. Where France invested, Canada withdrew. Where one nation built a symbol of progress, the other erased its own. The story echoes the fate of the Avro Aero, cancelled in 1959 and swept from the skies, its blueprints destroyed, its engineers scattered. For those who built the turbo, the sense of loss is sharper with each passing year. One former United Aircraft engineer, looking back, described it as watching your life's work be swept away by people who never understood what it could become. Today, the world counts over 57,000 kilometers of high-speed rail. Canada, once ahead of the curve, stands on the sidelines, its most ambitious rail project reduced to a footnote. The turbo train's legacy is not just a vanished machine, but a vanished future, a reminder that national ambition can be undone as quickly as it is declared. Canada once stood on the threshold of a new era, then chose retreat over resolve. Today, countries that once looked to us for inspiration speed ahead on rails we abandoned. The lesson is brutal. Technological ambition without political courage guarantees only regret. The future was built here, then buried by our own hand. National pride demands memory, but national greatness demands we refuse to repeat this mistake. What would we choose if offered that chance again?